go through a sample application on XM Online in the view that you would see as a broker. So first, let me just tell you who's here in the office in DC, so you know who's on the other end. I'm Amy Shinkman, the Director of Broker Relations. We also have Jean Fitzgibbon, Director in Trade Credit Insurance, Walter Koskow, the VP in Trade Credit Insurance, and Lauren Kirsch from IMT, and then some other IMT colleagues are in the room as well. If anyone's having any trouble hearing me or not getting the sound or not getting the picture, and you can't speak yourself, then please feel free to type in a question or a comment and we'll see your little message off to the side. Now, as we go in this webinar, we'll accept questions from you either verbally or if you prefer to type them in and remain anonymous, that's completely fine. It's not too large of a group, so hopefully we can have an interactive session. If you're struggling to keep up with anything, just please feel free to type in a question, and we'll definitely respond to you. So I'll hand over now to Walter, who will just talk for a couple minutes with some reminders about Express Insurance.
Good morning, everybody. Just a quick recap on the product. Express Insurance was rolled out this past April at our annual conference. Since the rollout over the last 5 months, we have sold 106 Express policies. It's meeting our expectations. We had projected selling about 250 policies over a 12-month period, so we are right on track, and that's with minimal promotion. What we did do, and unfortunately it was delayed, but in August we had a direct mailing to about 4,000 small business companies introducing the Express Insurance product. We have gotten some feedback, but I believe we will redo the mailing because August isn't the best month to be promoting given it's a heavy vacation month. The Express product is targeted for those small businesses who have not availed themselves of export credit insurance. There are many exporters who still utilize letters of credit or require prepayments on an export transaction or site payments on their transactions. Thus, the Express Insurance product is targeting those small businesses that may be just starting out or are in the past have been selling on very secure terms. It is a value-added product whereby Ex-Im Bank will pick up the cost and obtain credit reports for buyer limit feasibilities up to $300,000, and those applications are made together with the policy application. So Express is to simplify the process, add value. Ex-Im Bank essentially becomes the small business's credit department to review its foreign buyers and add to its foreign buyer portfolio. So far our experience is that the acceptance rate, and for brokers this is an important fact, the acceptance rate by exporters is exceeding the acceptance rate that we have had historically under our standard multi-buyer products. And those products are used for those exporters who are SBA small businesses but have much larger portfolios and have a greater amount of experience. We won't be going into those programs. We're going to focus on the Express application and point out some key issues that will help you complete the application with your exporter and help us process these quicker. Our processing times, we had marketed this product on a 5-day turnaround time, and that's for a policy quote and 2 buyer credit limit feasibility decisions. In some cases we have met or exceeded those targets, and in cases we have not, it's because more than likely the foreign buyer is not on the radio screen of any credit agencies that we currently are working with. So our turnaround times on buyer credit feasibilities have been somewhere in the range of 4 or 5 to 10 days, depending on availability of credit information. If you have questions on the product as we proceed, feel free to ask, or should we hold them until after we complete the application?
I'm happy for you to ask as we go. If it gets too unruly, then maybe we'll ask you wait till the end, but let's give it a try
Okay.
during the application.
The one thing I will say up front is if an applicant is applying for an express policy and they are providing names and addresses and the required credit limit for a few credit feasibilities, it is very helpful to know whether any sales have been made to these buyers, whether they were on letter of credit, site, or on a prepaid basis. That's still very helpful because it does tell us that the exporter has some experience, perhaps has done some background information, or perhaps even visited the buyers. That information is all helpful to us. We'll now proceed going through the online application.
Thanks a lot, Walter. Just a couple of technical points before we get started on the application. I noticed that maybe some of you are moving around in your offices or something, and we're getting some noise. So if you are moving around or there's some other background noise, if you could just mute yourself, we would appreciate it. We did have one person write in with a question saying, "What is IMT?" And I apologize for using the acronym. I believe it stands for Information Management Technology. But it's basically the team here at Ex-Im that does all of the programming for Ex-Im Online and deals with all the usability issues. So they're kind of like the brains behind Ex-Im Online, if you will. So they're here supporting us today. So I'm just going to start now to make sure that we all know how to find Ex-Im Online. Hopefully you can all, it's okay. Hopefully you can all see the main Ex-Im webpage, and I would recommend that you all get used to looking at the new insurance broker portal. You click on Insurance Brokers, and then to get to Ex-Im Online, you can just click on the first link here, Ex-Im Online. This obviously takes you to the login screen where you could log in and do everything on Ex-Im Online. Today, for this call, we're using a test system. Obviously, we won't be using any real exporter information. So I'm going to go over to a slightly different screen and log in now to that. While I'm doing that, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background. Sorry. Make sure I do this right. A little bit of a background to how it's come about that you're filling in this express application for someone. Basically, you've known this couple for many years. You always run into them at export events, and they have a little winery in Virginia. One of them is from Chile and one of them is from Brazil, but they studied winemaking in France, and they've immigrated to Virginia, have this business. It's quite a successful small winery in Virginia. They have been exporting for almost 10 years, but only to Chile and Brazil. And every time you've talked to them about insuring those markets, they always say, "Oh, we don't need to insure those markets. We have these key distributors there, only one for each country. You know, they're our cousins. You know, we would never want to take out insurance on them. You know, go away, broker." But now they have this business opportunity that they let you know about to start moving into Asia. And they really don't know anything about Asia. They're a little bit nervous about it, and they have just signed one contract with a distributor in Singapore. They're talking to some distributors in China and Japan, and so they're starting to be interested in insurance. So that's why they've come to you. Now here we are back to the screen on the broker landing page, and this is where you always come when you log into Ex-Im Online. And if you wanted to apply for Express Insurance, you would click here where it says Apply for Insurance Policy or Guarantee. And then what this does is take you to a list of all the companies who've named you as their broker. So it's important that you first got your friends from Chile and Brazil set up on Ex-Im Online and had them name you as your broker, as their broker. So as long as they've done that, they'll be here and you can click on the name of the company. The next screen that you come to is Application Type. So obviously looking down here, if you're looking for Express Insurance, that would be a multi-buyer policy. So you select that. And then here you come to the screen that lets you choose if you would like Express Insurance or one of our other multi-buyer policies. A lot of this gets into what Walter was talking about before about criteria for Express or other whole turnover businesses. It's important to remember that for Express, the company has to have less than 10 foreign buyers. You know that's the case in this case because they only have one in, so far they only have one in Brazil and one in Chile. They also need to have less than $7.5 million per year in annual export credit sales over the last 3 years. From that, you can exclude sales to Canada and those on LC or site payment terms. In this case, they only have sales to those two countries, and their sales are more like $2 million a year. So they easily make the criteria. They also need to be a small business by the SBA definition, and they know that they are because they've looked into working with the SBA in the past. They also would like Ex-Im Bank to look at all their buyer credit limits. So in other words, they really do not want a DCL. I don't know if Walter has anything to add to the selection criteria.
Yeah, just with regards to the first criteria of 10 or less buyers, that essentially would be 10 or less buyers on credit terms. So if the company actually has 20 buyers, but they sell to them all on letters of credit or all on prepaid basis, or if they are all in Canada, they could still be eligible for the Express product.
Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, we'll move on. So this is a demo of Express, so we'll click on Start Express Application for this client. Now this is a summary page that just lets you know a little bit about how to use the system, tells the information that you need to have. I'm kind of assuming here that as the broker you've already met with the client and probably had them fill in a paper proposal form. So you should have all the information that you need from them to hand from that. So we won't read through this whole screen just in the interest of time. So we're going to click Continue. And then here we are. This is just going back to the first screen of company info. This is actually already pre-populated because in this case they've already selected you as the broker. The company is here in Virginia. They have chosen you as their broker, which is Ex-Im Broker Inc. here in Washington, and their contact information is already there because they've set themselves up online. So we're going to continue. Can I just make sure that everyone is hearing us because no one's asked any questions yet? Can anyone say anything?
I have no questions.
Okay. Okay. As long as we know you're there, then we're happy. It looks like there are about 20 or so of you logged on now, so that's a good sign. If you are having any trouble, please do write in a question and let us know. Okay. Thank you. So next we go to the screen, which is general questions. And in this case, our business is actually owned by a woman and a minority, so we're going to check both boxes. We learned about Ex-Im Bank, of course, through our broker, so we're going to make sure we write that. They're coming, in this case, to insurance for risk mitigation. We're just going to say they don't have an existing credit line. I don't know if Jean or Walter want to comment on that question, the reason for the question.
Well, if the applicant has a credit line with a bank, they obviously have been there's been some due diligence, and it does add to the quality of the application to know that perhaps they have gone through that process.
Okay, thank you.
Plus with Express, you're still eligible for the enhanced assignment. So it's also helpful to know if you're applying for enhanced assignment, do you have a current existing line of credit? So some people think with Express you can't get the enhanced assignment, but you are still eligible.
Great, thank you. And we're going to say in this case they don't have a working capital loan and they don't have from SBA or from Ex-Im. They don't sell capital goods. You'll see that is automatically defaulted to no, because in this case they're selling bottles of wine. And in this case, we'll also say that they don't want to insure any sales made by affiliates. Just for simplicity's sake, they just have the one vineyard in Virginia. So we're going to continue. And then the next step is asking you to add the products. And it's very important that you make sure that they add all of the products that they're looking for cover for under the policy and that they're specified correctly. So we'll click on Add New Product. The test system is a little bit slow, so sorry about that. First, you look here for your sector code, which in this case is a consumer good. Go ahead, Walter.
Yeah, on this screen, actually at the bottom of the screen, if it's known to yourself or the exporter what their industry code that SBA and Exim Bank uses, it's NAICS. It's on the left side towards the bottom of the screen. Okay. If you know the 6-digit number, you could enter that in, and you don't have to go through this sequence that we're preparing to go through. So that's a shortcut. But you may not know the number, or you're not sure of the number, then you go through the 3-step process of determining what is the correct next code.
Thank you. That's a good point. So basically, these three boxes are letting you, get to the number, which if you already knew it, you could write in the box. You need to, in between each step, you need to make sure you click on this Show Subsectors thing so it loads the right ones. In this case, it's beverage manufacturing. And then we're going to narrow it down to one more, which is wineries. And it's important that they type in the NAICS code for themselves. So this is themselves as the exporter, not their buyers. So their buyers are distributors or restaurants or grocery stores, but you need to make sure they put in their own code here. And as Walter was saying, if they already knew that they were 312130, because this is a code they've dealt with before, they could have just typed that in here and saved themselves looking it up. So here we're just going to write wine. Would that be enough of a description for you guys, or would you want something more detailed?
Well, the importance of putting in this specific description is this is what will actually appear in the policy declaration. Because you've made the selection on the next code, that's really for underwriting purposes and for our recording purposes. But for the actual policy documents, this specific description is what will appear. So specifically, industries where, for instance, there could be new or used equipment, it's very important to put in new or used equipment, that nature, or new or reconditioned aircraft parts. Wine is fine here.
Okay, thank you. So then here the important thing is to add product. And that means that whatever you type there would then show up in any policy document under exported products. And if you had other products that you were also looking to export under this policy, you could add them here as well. In this case, we won't do that because we're assuming that they only sell wine. So now we're going to hit continue and go to the next screen. And these questions mainly relate to some of our policies and procedures here at Exim Bank. Of course, a lot of them relate to U.S. content. So we're going to say, are these products manufactured in the U.S.? Yes. Are they shipped from the U.S.? Yes. Are they on the munitions control list? No. Where would they find the munitions control list if they wanted to check?
State Department website. State Department website.
State Department website. But we're assuming that wine is not on that list. Are these products sold to military entities? No. Do they support nuclear energy? No. Are they new? Yes. Are they used? No. And then these next two questions will default to no, but it's really just asking if this policy could get extra consideration for being environmentally beneficial or renewable energy related. The next series of questions here, obviously all of the express applicants will be SBA small businesses. So really this last question will never apply, but they do need to make sure they look at these three questions. In most cases, I would assume that people will answer yes to A here, and therefore not need to answer B and C. B and C are really made there for small businesses who want to take advantage of the new U.S. content rules that lets them insure a percentage of their invoice if it's less than 50%, or lets them aggregate the products on an invoice. If you have any questions about those advantages, please ask me or Walter or Jean offline, and we can connect you with someone in policy and planning if necessary. Are there any more questions as I go through this? Okay then, we'll move on. The next screen is really talking about their experience as an exporter. Now, in this case, the winery only wants to ensure their new buyers in Asia. So we're going to say that their requested policy payment limit is $1 million. And we're going to say they began exporting in 2004. This was to their cousins in Brazil and Chile. They started offering credit terms to their cousins in 2007. And for the last 3 years, they've had a total of $6 million in export credit sales. And just to confirm, this is the total for 3 years, correct? So they've had $2 million a year, so they write $6 million here. This is not their average annual, it's the total for 3 years. And then it asks how much have they written off in the last 3 years, and we're going to say $50,000. Although actually that doesn't really make sense, considering that they only have these 2 buyers. So we'll say 0. And their cousin would have never defaulted on them. The amount of credit sales outstanding, we'll say it was about $1.75 million as of the end of August, which is when you met with them and they gave you the download from their computer. One thing to make sure you do here is that you do write the year with all the zeros if it's, or the month with all the zeros if it's August, put the 0 first or it won't accept it. And we're going to say that they don't have any past dues. If they did have any past dues, do you want to comment on what would happen if they had them?
Well, it does give you the other screen.
Mm-hmm. Then it would take you to the screen asking basically who was the buyer, when was it due, how much is it. So it would ask you a lot of questions for details about that. But we're going to assume they don't have any by more than 60 days. And then here we are on financial highlights. These questions are also in the proposal form that you would have gone through with them when you met with them. And we're going to say, is the data include parent, consolidated, or combined with any other entity? We're going to say no, because they're just one little small business in Virginia. We have their numbers for the year 2010. So we're going to say it was that, and we're making sure we write in all the numbers there so it accepts it. The statement dates apply to the balance sheet and the income statement. We know that the statement was CPA compiled because they showed it to us in their office, but it wasn't audited. Their total sales in that year were about 20 million. I'm going to make sure we get the right number of zeros. Their net profit was 500,000. Their assets are 2 million because they have their winery in Virginia, and their equity is 1 million now. That they were able to pay off some debt with their retained earnings. So then we're going to hit continue. Hopefully it will accept that. Go ahead, Jean.
I just want to make a point on the financials. Technically with the Express, you don't have to submit hard copy financials. We'll just take those 4 pieces of information. However, a couple things. One, if they're negative equity and negative operating profit or things that don't meet our standards, we would appreciate their financials to look at them. And also if they're applying for an enhanced assignment, obviously we would need the standard 2 to 3 year financial statements, to justify the EA qualification.
Great. Thank you, Jean. So now is the point where in the Express application they're actually able to submit a request for a special buyer credit limit at the same time as the application. So we're going to click on Add Buyer. And this was the contract they've just recently won in Singapore. And the name of the buyer is just going to be Singapore Wine Distributors Private Limited in Singapore. So we're going to see if that buyer is already in our system, which it's not. So we're going to click on Add New Buyer here. And then it's important that that you enter as much information as possible on this buyer so that we're able to make sure that we get the right credit report, etc., since we'll be downloading that in this case. Forgot what it was called now. Singapore Wine Distributors, I think. You do have to type it in again. in the interest of time here, I'm only going to fill in the fields that are required fields, but please do fill in as much as you can so we can make sure to get the right credit reports. And I'm not going to fill in the primary contact in this case. So again, just important that you fill in all the information here so that we can get all the information. So I'm going to add buyer. And I'm going to be requesting a credit limit to start of $250,000. And I'm hoping to sell to them on open account on, because it is in Singapore, we're going to say 61 to 90 days. And then we're going to press continue. This is where you do have the option to add up to 5 buyers on express applications. In this case, we'll only do one because it all follows the same rules. I don't know if Jean or Walter has anything to add to the buyers' screens.
No.
No? Okay. So we'll continue on to the last screen. This is where you, in this case, you're only applying for a $250,000 limit. So there's no financial statements required, but if they happen to have the financial statements of the buyer in Singapore, it'd be great if you could upload them here, or any references or anything else you have, bank references. It's always very useful to the underwriter and will help the turnaround time if you do include them. The other thing I think that you know, the underwriters and everyone would appreciate is if in this comments box here you could maybe just give a little bit of background about the company, like maybe say selling since 2004 to cousins in Brazil and Chile, now expanding to Asia, 1 contract in Singapore now, hope to add more buyers in China and Japan soon. Anything else to add to that?
Yeah, just how you develop buyers might be helpful as well in terms of, in this particular case, meeting prospective buyers at trade shows, that type of thing, and you know what type of or any investigation of companies as you develop buyers will be helpful. There's another thing as you progress through this application. If for any reason you have to stop any information once in the upper right corner where the sections are checked, those have been completed, so it will be saved. And at any time, if you wish, if you go to the top of the page under Application Summary, you'll see all the information that you've entered so far, or just before you submit. So you can double check your entries, and perhaps if you made a typo and put in 20,000 instead of 2 million, you can make those corrections. You can go back to any section where there's general questions.
Yeah, this is just showing how you can click on any of those items on the right side if you need to edit it before it's submitted. You
Right.
can always go back.
And yeah, at the very front end on the instruction page, are we able
Yeah,
to go there?
application instructions.
Yeah, on this instruction page, and this important notice, which is, can you go there?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The bold and important, the hyperlink to the country limitation schedule, that's pretty important because if the exporter is in this application, they may only be focusing on that one Singapore or that one Chinese customer. And especially if it's an emerging market or an obscure market, it's very important to go into the country limitation schedule to see if Exim Bank is open or whether there are any coverage conditions in the marketplace. So this link is very useful because their focus may be, I just want to get that Singapore or Chinese customer insured.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, I forgot to mention that earlier, but this would also be something that you hopefully would have gone through with them when you were with them in the meeting to make sure that the countries they were interested were eligible. for open account cover. So now I'm going to go just back to this application and comments. Whoops, it hasn't saved what we wrote there. But hopefully we made it clear that as much as you can say really about any of your buyers, about your experience with the buyers, about how you find new buyers, why you're interested in buying the insurance, anything that you're able to put in there with background about the client will help the underwriters. Yeah, obviously this is also the time to note if you also have a cousin in Singapore, or you have some ownership interest in the distributor in Singapore. This
Only
is
if you're going to be insuring.
where you would also need to put that here. And then, so if once you've been through this and you've looked at the application summary, and you think, you as the broker think everything is filled out correctly, I would then encourage you to call the exporter, let them know that you filled it out, and then have them be the ones to review the application and hit the submit button, and also sign the application certification page.
You can hit continue. So.
Oh yeah, right. We need to hit continue in order to save that. Oh, okay. Our colleagues from Information Management Technology have pointed out that the reason why it didn't save my comments before is because I didn't hit continue. But once you hit continue on any screen, it always saves everything that you've put in. You don't actually have to hit a button that says save. This system does pretty well at saving.
And that confirms it.
Yeah, and then now you can see over there that that attachments and comments section is checked now that we hit the continue button. So as I was saying, I would encourage you to get the exporter to look at everything you've written and confirm that it's correct. And it's important also that they sign the application certification page. That does have to be an actual physical signature, and it does need to be ideally sent to us in PDF form. Can you? Oh, it's also the ideal way, actually, to receive this is to go back to the attachments and comments section and then upload it there. And that way the underwriter will receive the certification at the same time as they receive the application. Yeah, which is just here. It lets you, if you browse your computer, wherever you have it saved, it lets you attach it there. I think that pretty much concludes what we had wanted to walk through with you today. Does anyone have any questions?
We'll just add, once you hit the submit button, you will get an email, and if the broker's been named, there will be an email sent that there has been a submission. And the transaction, if you're going online to check on the status as it's being underwritten, the tracking number is in the upper right screen. That's how you would identify this particular transaction. And what will happen is once this is submitted, there will be two tracking numbers, one for the policy application and one for the buyer feasibility request. So there will be two tracking numbers available to view.
Yeah, so and then once you've submitted it, you'll be able to go back to your home page, look at pending applications, and view it there and find out whatever's going on with it.
And since on the Express, when you're submitting these feasibility SPCLs, when we quote, you'll be getting the quote documents for the policy, but you won't be getting documents for the special buyer credit limit. You'll get an email saying it's approved, or we can't, or what we could approve, or maybe we can't right now because we have no credit information. And once the policy is taken out, then the system will automatically endorse those buyers that we're able to approve to the policy. So I just want to make sure you know when for feasibility SPCLs, you won't get a document from the system with the parameters.
Thank you, Jean. The last thing to notice is then, so this is where in XM Online you look at your pending applications. Once the policy is live, then obviously you can click on Insurance in Force.
You have to accept the quote. So,
Right, there's something. Okay.
That's the link.
Sorry, as we just talk amongst ourselves. The step before looking at an in-force policy would be once you actually have your quote issued, which you can also view on XM Online, you would go to Act In Quote. Unfortunately, on this particular broker, there aren't any quotes there. We haven't set any up, but that's where they would appear, and then it would later appear under the Insurance in Force once it was bound. Anything else?
Other than viewing policies in the portfolio.
We just throw it in.
Yeah, there's nothing. But that's really
Okay, well, I think that pretty much completes what we had wanted to show you today about applying for Express Insurance online. If there's no more questions, we will end the webinar. Are there other
Thank
questions?
you.
Oh, has answered question. Sorry, we're just saying that a few people had typed in questions. We're having a little bit of trouble finding them. We will, we may just end the webinar now and email you or call you separately with the answers, if that's all right. Sorry about that. Thank you very much. Whoops. So where are the questions?
Do you know that it's shut off?
They're all
They
muted.
can't hear us?
It's paused. Can't they not hear?